And yeah, how to make it done. That is now the question that we have with the panel that's joined me. This is an amazing group of people. I'd just like to introduce them first. I've got Miriam Turner to my right. This is the co-CEO of Friends of the Earth, a long-standing partner of Triodos Bank UK. Stephanie Ween, CEO and founder of Gympanzees, a Triodos customer and a charity that provides fun and fitness for disabled children and young people. I've got Poku Osei. He is the CEO of Babasa, who you heard from Bevis was speaking about earlier, a Triodos partner and youth empowerment organization. And then I've got Sjoerd Rosing, the fund manager now of Triodos Future Generations Fund from Triodos Investment Management. So welcome to the panel. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to just kick off, like bouncing off the film we've just seen. I'm going to ask you, Miriam, because I know Friends of the Earth has a youth network, Young Friends of the Earth. Did you know what we heard those children saying? Is that mirroring what you hear your youth activists speak about as well?
And what young people are saying, what all of us are saying, right? I think they're absolutely right, both in what's needed and I think in that disappointment. Because all of us want to give our children, all children, a world to grow up in. And the truth is, and I think we do need to say it, we are not on track for that. We're on a very different path, and we're seeing more and more of these kind of extraordinary developments, aren't we? Whether it's swathes of Asia underwater, the droughts and famines in Somalia, the wildfires, the incredible heat waves, the record-breaking temperatures, kind of the list goes on, and that's on our watch, and these young people are seeing that. So we know what we need to do. We need to act and change, or else the climate and nature crises will change us. So I think that's manifestly apparent, and that's kind of what they were saying, right? And we also know the what is needed. We have to get off fossil fuels, and we have to restore and protect nature. And I think the how bit is really interesting, because what we've seen as Friends of the Earth over 50 years of environmental campaigning is what works is collective action and the kind of collective voice. And that's when we can put that pressure on, whether it's governments or business, because they're going to listen to a collective voice if they want our money or our vote, right? So I think that voice saying what we expect, that we need better, is really crucial. And that's what we're really working on with our youth work and our support of youth activism. We actually work predominantly with young people who might not have historically been very well represented in the environmental movement, which I think is really important. So that might be disabled young people, racialized young people, people from a working class background who have a really critical kind of lived experience and perspective on these crises, and I think historically have not been listened to. Yeah.
Well, yeah, certainly how we get people. Well, I guess what you said earlier, how we get to a point where governments understand if they want our money and our votes, certain actions need to take place. Yeah, we're gonna come to that definitely with further down the panel. But Poku, I just wanted to ask you, there's this concept of being a good ancestor to the generations to come. Miriam's highlighted how we need to consider social, environmental issues, and also hearing from people from as many backgrounds as possible. I think most people agree, that is a good thing. So can you share your own perspective, your personal perspective on the importance of enabling all young people to thrive equitably?
Yeah, I think what I would say to that, Gillian, is almost looking at it from a slightly different angle by saying that what happens if we don't? What's the cost if we don't allow all young people to thrive equitably? And I think in a very human way, it fosters apathy. But that feeling of apathy and that feeling of exclusion, as we know, and as research shows, feeds into what we know to be high levels of social vice, high levels of crime, and certainly the lack of care for the environment and those individuals in question. So there is a cost that we can't neglect. And gone are the days where, such costs were neatly sort of sectioned off to parts of society. But But now we know that what happens in London has a direct impact, at times within seconds, in Bristol, and what happens in Bristol has an impact in Washington. So that's something that we need to try and address head on, and recognise that the negative impact of apathy and exclusion has a cost for us all. I think the flip side to that is also saying that, okay, what is the opportunity forgone if we don't move to act equitably or engage these groups equitably? And for that, I'll probably say two things. I think the first would probably be the failure to nurture that next generation of actors and activists in our communities. We can talk about environmental impact all we want, but if we are not nurturing those actors and activists from all communities, then the probability is that we are not going to see that systemic difference that we all hope for our planet. So there is that. I think the second thing is about recognizing that we also lose, whether as organizations, institutions, and communities, we also lose if we don't engage equitably to tap and draw out the talent from these communities, because they do have lived experience to be able to help us make sound judgments for what we need to do to help bring about that social and environmental impact, positive impacts that we all seek. So that's how I'll take those. I'll take your question.
Thank you. I mean, it's really interesting how every person I've ever spoken to about this comes at this from a slightly different angle. But, you know, at the end of the day, I feel like it's really compelling that, you know, everyone needs to be brought along
absolutely.
for the ride. Stephanie, I just wanted to ask you about your work. I know your organization was created to fill a gap.
Yep.
For providing affordable leisure facilities for disabled children and young people. Probably need that now more than ever in this cost of living crisis. I call the cost of growing wealth and inequality crisis, but that's another discussion for another day, I reckon. Can you just tell us, though, what's the difference that you see in your daily work and also just in terms of the organizational level in being able to provide these facilities, not just for health and well-being in the short term, but also in the longer term for young people?
Well, it's just a huge problem. And watching that film it made me quite sad, because these children who are celebrating the world that they love and that they get to enjoy, our disabled children, young people, aren't able to enjoy that. And they are often stuck at home, either because of physical difficulties getting out into the world. If you're in a wheelchair, it's hard to get on a beach or go around a farm. If you have sensory difficulties, if you've got ADHD or autism, then actually you're feeling the world too much or not feeling it enough, and going to a busy playground is just not going to happen. And so these children are really isolated from other people, but also really isolated from this beautiful world that we've got. And so what we're doing, we're opening a leisure centre for these children. And these are the children who need exercise and play more than anyone else. Exercise and play is how children develop, and these are children who aren't developing in the same way as other children. And so if they're not exercising, they're not getting strong, they're not developing their skills, they're potentially not reaching their milestones. And if you can give them the right kind of exercise, then they can do those things. And the same with the sensory world. For a lot of our children with autism or ADHD, actually, if they can get the right kind of exercise, then they can concentrate, they can communicate with others, they can have a relationship with other people and really succeed at school. But if they're not getting this exercise and play that every other children gets, they're not able to do that. So we've seen huge impacts just in the short time that we've been doing our centres with children who speak to a stranger for the first time, or 15% of our visitors make a friend for the first time. Like, it is being able to have the environment and the exercise and play that is therapeutic in a way allows them to really be in this world. And that, for future, if you can work on this when they're children, then the world's your limit for them as adults.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly echoes the question that you sort of flipped back to me, Poku, which is like, what do we lose if we don't have this? And yeah, it sounds like, we clearly must be all winners if everyone has somewhere to thrive, somewhere to develop, all that stuff.
Absolutely, and it's 66,000 children and young people with disabilities within an hour of Bristol. This is a big problem.
Wow, that's actually really sobering. Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Sjoerd, I just wanted to turn to you. We've heard, both from Poku, from Stephanie, about the importance of, making these provisions from children. From a fund manager's point of view, and this is, I make a lot of assumptions. I would answer this question in my way, but I want to hear what you have to say. Why isn't child welfare higher up on the agenda of governments and businesses?
Yeah, I think there's one very obvious answer to it, and it's sort of embedded in what Poku also said. You need to be a good ancestor, but businesses are not set up for that. They focus on making their quarterly results, and when you do that, then basically you're not thinking about children as a stakeholder. You're not thinking about them as your future customers, as your future employees. Basically, it all stops there. So that's a problem. So companies really need to embrace long-termism, and when they do, I think they're in a much better position to analyze their stakeholders and say, hey, children are a relevant stakeholder for us because they have very different needs versus me or let's say adults. So that's one part. But the other part is companies simply don't know. They think child well-being, yeah, that's child labor. We have a policy for that, so it's all okay. We don't need to care about it. But that's the wrong assumption. That's again looking at it from a quarterly results perspective and only thinking about the next quarter. So that needs to change as well. But the good thing is that there's lots of resources to help companies actually do that. So for example, the fund that I manage is in support of UNICEF. So we work together with them to get companies to understand the importance of this topic and get this on their agenda. So they have lots of resources that can be used. But it's just a matter of bringing it to them. And there are different organizations as well. So I also see it as my responsibility when I manage the fund. Of course, I want to generate a very good return, but I also see it as my responsibility to convince companies of this need. So that's something that we're pushing for, because whether it's businesses or governments, children just don't have a seat at the table. They have no voting rights. They're not an economic agent, so to speak. I mean, they have a little bit of money, of course, but not enough to care. And somebody needs to help them. And I think that's as much as I can do. That's what I can do.
Right. So you're the fund manager of the Triodos Future Generations Fund, and that's how you keep an eye on that within this organization.
Yes, yeah, and I have 2 little kids as well, so I bring it home as well and try to embrace it there as well. But yeah.
So it's a real world as well.
Yeah, it's on my mind 24/7.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do, is give everyone a chance to kind of outline and have a little one impactful thing. So maybe starting with you, Miriam, can you give an example of one thing that could be done or is already being done that you can think of that's going to make a positive impact for young people and for future generations?
Yeah. And a bit of background about why I think it's so important, just building on some of the conversations we've all been having. Some Friends of the Earth recent research identified that there's 1.6 million children in England living seriously nature-deprived lives. And I think that matters for lots of reasons. One, obviously, is the physical and mental health. We all know how it feels being in nature and having access to it. The second is, of course, in urban areas, we know that there's loads of benefits of having greenery, just in terms of resilience to heat island effects and extreme weather. And then critically, and we were all chatting about this earlier, of course, we can't protect and love what we don't know and haven't experienced. So I think fundamentally access to nature and the outdoors and play is just absolutely critical for for the future. So that leads me to, one thing is the Postcode Gardener program that we're running. So we're identifying where there are most areas of nature deprivation and then working with a kind of community organizer, gardener who works with young people, community organisations there to really radically green up the most grey areas. And then through connection with that programme, we're also working on campaigns that I'd love to talk to you about around the rights, the kind of human right to a healthy environment, and we're working to enshrine that in law. And if that were the case, that would really radically change things for all of us and for young people. So, yeah, please join us on that campaign.
Code Gardner. Thank you.
Yeah.
Steph, I'm going to ask you. I mean, you kind of already are doing the thing. So, what is something else, or something that that you'd like to see done more?
I mean, it's so broad, but basically increase the understanding of disability. It is such a complex world, and it is so unknown, and there is not enough activism around disability or education around disability, because if people knew actually that all they need to do is put the coffee machine in the kitchen instead of on the counter, then a disabled child could go into that coffee shop. There are these little things that could fundamentally change these children's lives and allow them to be, part of the world, as we were saying. So, and I love what you said, Miriam, about they have to be in it to appreciate it and to want to love it. And if the world can be more inclusive to disabled people, you take away the dis of disabled. They become able in a world that works for them. But that comes from understanding. And it's frustrating because it's not because people are trying to be ableist or not understand. It's just a lack of understanding. It's not talked about enough.
Yeah, and I imagine there's sort of the visible and also invisible disabilities, and that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, it is an incredibly complex area. But for children, it's 8% of children. For adults, it's 20% of adults. It's massive.
Wow.
And people, these people are hidden away, and we don't see them enough, and we don't hear them enough. So yeah, we need to get talking about disability.
Okay, thank you. Sherd, with your 2 children and also your sort of the wider issue, what's the one thing that you'd like to see being done to impact future generations positively?
Well, I think what you see, and also in the video, is that children, while they don't have a formal voice, they cannot vote, but they are, if I compare it to when I was young, which is some time ago, then they are so much more engaged with today's, let's say, hot topics, that they are almost, they're the change agent themselves. And I think that's a very positive development. And I see that also in the way that my kids grow up. They get different values than when I was young. For example, my dad used to work, my mom did all the household work, and now it's normal that you divide those things. And even if that's slow, that will slowly create a positive development towards a more equitable, but also I think in the end a society that's more inclusive, but also puts nature higher on the agenda. Because in the end, if I think about what do I want my kids to inherit from me, it's not money. I want them to inherit a nice world to live on, and not one that is full with concrete and what have you. And that's
A world to grow up in.
Yeah, exactly.
More nature. I remember being stood, this is in London a few months back, and looking up, and I realized that the only thing that I could see that wasn't made by humans was the moon. It was one little street, so I know the lovely parks in London and stuff, but it did strike me as like, wow, that's pretty mad. Poku, what would you like to see?
I think it is us individuals and as organisation is us recognising that actually if we allow our reach to be further than our grasp in everything that we do, that little bit is what at times shift the dial. And to quickly put it into perspective, so Babasa, I think about 2 months ago, decided to mobilize 10 young people and engage them about the conversation around sustainability and the environment. And actually, 10 young people stepped up, and they've never had the chance to be part of such a conversation. And in the end, what they've ended up doing is saying that they're going to host an event and bring more young people into that conversation. So they're hosting an event on the 9th of May. It's not a plug at all. It's
Yeah, go on, plug it.
at the Malcolm X Center, bringing, I think, 120 more young people to have the conversation about the role they play in making the society a bit more environmentally friendly. So that's one. That's just one organization facilitating the conversation. And yet, going back to your point, they've taken it on, and now they're doing more that they would have otherwise. Then the other thing is seeing this beautiful young lady here today taking pictures of us at Traders. And that's a young lady that, as an individual called Katie decided to mentor just a few years ago. And this young lady is full of, she said I shouldn't mention her name, but she's so full of, she wants to do good in the world.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to her. I knew her through Babasta, of course, but now she works at Traders. And I was talking to her about how she finds Traders. And it's almost like she's working in a dream now, because she's not only is she part of something that's greater than her, she's actually also enabling other organizations. She feels that she's enabling other organizations, i.e. clients, to do better. So I think it's just allowing ourselves, our reach to be a bit further than our grasp in what we do. I think that's what will keep shifting the dial.
Wonderful, wonderful. It is, that mentoring relationship as well. I think, one of the things that I sort of think about is so much of our relationships are now mediated through kind of, digital interfaces of various kinds. And it's worth remembering that sort of face-to-face
Absolutely.
still, well, it has so much traction. So just perhaps as a final question to you, Miriam, as the co-CEO of Friends of the Earth, so an organization with very clear vision about, the world we're trying to create. What do you think future generations need to thrive from, kind of like pulling it all together, joining all the dots together?
Well, I think the honest answer is they need us now to be taking more action and campaign like that. That's what's needed. And I think environmental campaigning, social campaigning, change, practical programs, there needs to be far better kind of integration between all of those. And like this panel, I think really demonstrates that. We've had really great kind of chats backstage as well. I think that integration of all of us that are working well together already, and us doing more so that young people inherit that world to grow up in. And by the way, don't get me started on the social media piece, the digital piece. I think that's just so critical. Like we're social creatures, right? Like relationships really matter, and face-to-face really matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you. I know we've kind of really raced through and just skimmed the surface of the work that you all do. But I mean, I'm guessing if you're watching this, if you're a Triodos customer, if you're thinking about being a Triodos customer, then, you're already kind of, in this discussion in some form or another. So please do keep the conversation going with Triodos. I know that the team will be here to take your questions even after the event and beyond. Just for me to say thank you so much again to all of you for watching, for the panel, for everyone that's taken part and made today possible. And it's all that's left for me to do is to hand over to Bevis for a final word for today. But thank you.
Thank you, Gillian, and hello again, everyone. At the beginning of today, we asked you a question about how you felt about the future of our world and what it meant for future generations, and 73% of you said that you were worried, and 9% of you said that you were hopeful. And what I hope is that, having listened to a very inspiring panel of very special people doing amazing things to support future generations, you feel a little more hopeful after today's event. If you do have more questions, as Gillian said, we pride ourselves on being a very transparent and accessible bank. So if more questions have come up about what we do, please just email us at events@triodos.co.uk and we will answer your questions. And hopefully the team online have picked up many of the questions that have come up through today. So huge thank you to our panel. Huge thank you to Gillian, as ever, for being a wonderful host of our event. Thank you to the marketing and communications team of Triodos Bank, who do an amazing job of organising this event, very well supported by King Sound, who have done all the tech behind the scenes. And most importantly, thank you to you. Thank you for those of you that are customers, for the support and advocacy that you give to the bank. And we look forward to seeing you again.